Ladies, let's be honest. He disappeared. You were confused, maybe even heartbroken. And just when you started to move on, poof, he's back in your inbox, your DMS, or worse, your heart. So why do men come back after no contact? When a man returns after a period of no contact, it often has less to do with you and more to do with what your silence created. When you stop chasing, you become a mystery, and human nature is drawn to mysteries. Men get curious. Why did she stop reaching out? Has she moved on? Was she never as into me as I thought? That curiosity doesn't fade, it grows. Your silence, in his mind, is louder than any message you could have sent. It creates tension, and tension builds attraction. Suddenly, he's not in control of the situation anymore, and that unfamiliar feeling pulls him back. Another reason he comes back is that your energy is gone. You were giving him attention, affection, emotional support. And whether he realized it or not, he felt that energy. When it disappears, it creates a vacuum. That absence makes him feel something he wasn't expecting loss. Add to that the fact that many men expect women to wait for them. It's an ego thing. He assumed he could drift away and return on his terms, that you'd still be there, emotionally available. But when you're not, when you've been glowing up, growing stronger, and emotionally detaching, it becomes a wake-up call for him. He starts to question everything. Time is a strange thing. Sometimes it delays regret. Men can process emotions more slowly, especially if they've distracted themselves or tried to bury their feelings. Weeks or even months later, when life slows down and the distractions fade, regret can hit hard. He might scroll through your old photos, remember moments that felt insignificant at the time, but now sting with meaning. And let's not forget that social media plays a huge role in this. He sees you thriving, smiling, possibly even looking happier. That image contradicts the one he held in his mind, that you'd be stuck or waiting. That contradiction challenges his ego, and he wants to re-enter your life to see if he still holds a place in it. But often, when a man reaches out, it's not always about love. Sometimes it's a test. That random message or late night, hey, isn't always sincere. It's bait. He's checking to see if he still has access. If you respond too quickly, he feels validated. If you don't respond at all, it shakes him. The truth is, your detachment is powerful. It's not bitterness, it's clarity. And that clarity is attractive. Sometimes even more than love has been, in the end. The most important question isn't why he came back. It's whether the man who disappeared deserves to be part of the life you rebuilt while he was gone. When you go silent after a man disappears or pulls away, it can feel like you're doing nothing. But in reality, your silence is incredibly loud. Men often expect that if they back off, you'll chase or at least linger in the background. When you don't do that, when you don't text, call, or ask where things stand, it sends a powerful message. It tells him that you're not clinging, not desperate, and certainly not sitting around waiting. That silence speaks volumes about your self-respect, and whether he admits it or not, he hears it. This quiet confidence creates a shift in the dynamic. Where he once may have felt in control, now he's unsure. He starts to wonder what you're thinking, whether you've moved on or if you've met someone else. That Uncertainty makes your silence echo even louder in his mind. Instead of feeling reassured that he can come and go as he pleases, he's confronted with the reality that he may have lost his place in your life. It makes him feel unsteady, and often that's when he begins to think about reaching out. Your silence also forces him to sit with his own choices. Without you there to fill the space, he's left to face the consequences of pulling away. Sometimes, in that quiet space, he begins to feel regret. Not necessarily because he realizes he was wrong, but because he senses that the power has shifted once the apology has been. You've taken back your emotional energy, and that loss is something he starts to feel deeply. It's not just that you stopped speaking, it's that your silence removed the comfort he once took for granted. In the end, your silence becomes louder than any words could be. It's not meant to punish, but it communicates a boundary. A signal that your peace matters more than confusion or waiting for someone who couldn't choose you clearly the first time. That's what makes it so powerful. In a world full of noise, attention, and instant replies, your decision to stay silent stands out. It commands respect, even if it doesn't always bring the apology or clarity you hoped for. And more often than not, that silence is exactly what makes him come back. Many men, whether consciously or not, like to feel that they can return to someone when it suits them. It's a comfort to the ego to believe there's an open door, someone still emotionally available, someone who hasn't fully let go. That sense of control, of having access at any time, feeds their sense of security. They may not even miss the relationship itself, but the idea that you're still there, still affected by them, gives their ego something to hold on to. It's less about love and more about knowing they're still wanted. But when you don't give them that comfort, when you go silent, when you show no sign of waiting, when you actually start moving on, that illusion shatters. Suddenly, they're no longer sure if they can come back. They're faced with the unsettling idea that the door may be closed for good. This threatens their ego, and for many, that's a powerful trigger. It's in that moment of losing perceived control that they begin to act. Reaching out, checking in, or trying to rekindle something they once felt certain about. The idea that they've become a loose end in someone else's life, someone they thought they could return to, becomes deeply uncomfortable. The male ego often prefers closure on its own terms, not the silent distance that leaves questions unanswered. When you're no longer giving them emotional reassurance through messages, presence, or visible pain once the apology has been, they don't know where they stand. That's when the mind starts overthinking, imagining scenarios, and spiraling into what if thoughts that eventually push them to reconnect. This kind of reappearance isn't always about deep emotional connection or regret. Sometimes it's simply about the discomfort of not being in control of the narrative. When he senses that he's no longer in your orbit, that he might no longer have a place in your heart, he tries to reinsert himself, not necessarily because he's ready to offer something better, but because he wants to feel certain again. And that's why so often men return after no contact. Not out of clarity, but out of disrupted comfort. When you're emotionally invested in someone, you naturally give them your energy. That energy shows up in many forms. Your attention, your care, your time, your messages, and even your emotional support. You make them feel seen, valued, and understood. Whether they fully appreciate in the moment or not, they get used to it. It becomes a quiet presence in their life, something they rely on without even realizing how much it means. But when that flow of energy suddenly stops, it creates a noticeable void. Men often don't recognize the weight of that energy until it's no longer there. They may not immediately feel the loss when you stop reaching out or checking in, especially if they're distracted or chasing something else. But eventually, there comes a moment of stillness when life isn't as exciting, when their phone isn't lighting up the same way, or when they simply feel disconnected. It's in that stillness that your absence starts to echo. They remember the way your presence made them feel, and they realize that the emotional space you filled is now empty. When no one else steps in to fill that emotional gap, it becomes even more obvious. They might start seeking attention elsewhere or looking for someone who brings them the same comfort and warmth. But often, it doesn't feel the same. The connection they had with you wasn't just about companionship. It was about the energy exchange that made them feel secure, appreciated, or admired. And that specific emotional imprint doesn't disappear just because time passes or distractions come along. So when they start feeling that emptiness, they often confuse it with missing you. What they're really feeling is the loss of the energy you gave so generously. And that's what pulls them back. They may not fully understand why, but they're drawn again to the source that once made them feel good. It's not always about love, commitment, or a desire to fix things. Sometimes it's just about wanting to feel that energy again, the kind they didn't truly value until it was gone. Some men walk away thinking they have all the time in the world. They assume that no matter how long they disappear, you'll be there, emotionally available, waiting, hoping for them to return. This assumption doesn't always come from a place of cruelty. Sometimes it's just deep-seated entitlement or emotional immaturity. They believe their absence won't affect their place in your life because they've grown comfortable with the attention, affection, and energy you once gave freely. So when they leave, they expect a warm welcome whenever they decide to come back. But something unexpected happens when you don't wait. When you stop checking your phone, stop analyzing their behavior, and start focusing on yourself, your life begins to shift. You evolve. You gain clarity, confidence, and emotional distance. You start taking better care of yourself. Not to get their attention, but because you're finally giving your own energy back to you. And that growth shows. Whether they see it through social media, hear it from mutual friends, or simply feel your absence, then they start to realize that the version of you they took for granted no longer exists in the same way. That's when the confusion hits them. Suddenly, they're no longer sure where they stand with you. That the idea that you might have moved on, or worse, that you no longer need them, unsettles them. It creates discomfort and insecurity where there was once confidence and control. They start asking themselves questions they never considered. What if she doesn't want me back? What if she's with someone else? What if I waited too long? These thoughts create urgency, and often that urgency is what brings them back. Not necessarily love, but the fear of being forgotten or replaced. When they return, it's usually with subtle attempts to re-enter your life. A simple message, a random like on your photo, a vague excuse to reconnect. They're trying to see if the door is still open. What they often don't realize is that while they were gone, you changed. You stopped being the person who would wait endlessly. You stopped being someone who put them at the center of your life. And now has been. It's not whether you'll take them back. It's about whether they're even worth disrupting the peace you've built in their absence. When a man pulls away or disappears, it might not be because he doesn't care at all. It could simply be that he's not fully aware of what he feels. Many men are conditioned to avoid or delay processing emotions. Instead of sitting with discomfort or reflecting on their actions, they tend to distract themselves. They dive into work, hang out with friends, scroll endlessly through social media, or even explore new connections, apology has been. All in an effort to avoid facing the emotional consequences of walking away from someone who genuinely cared. But time has a way of slowing things down. When the initial distractions fade and the noise around them quiets, space is created for feelings to finally catch up. He might suddenly remember the comfort of your voice, the way you supported him, or the way you made him feel seen in a world that often feels cold. These moments don't always come immediately. They sneak up in quiet hours, in the middle of the night, or during unexpected triggers. It's not uncommon for this reflection to happen weeks or even months later, when you least expect it and long after you've started to heal. That delayed emotional awareness can lead to regret. Not always. He realizes he lost the love of his life, but because he starts to feel the absence of someone who genuinely cared. He remembers the way you were patient with him, how you listened, how you made him feel like he mattered. And it stings, has been. It's not always a deep realization of love. It could be a shallow fear of losing something comforting. That's when the late night message shows up. The Hague at 1:42 a.m., short, vague, but heavy with unspoken emotions and a quiet hope that you'll still be there. What he often doesn't consider is how much you've changed in that time. While he was just beginning to feel the loss, you were already learning to live without him. You picked yourself up, processed the hurt, and started moving forward. So when he finally reaches out, it's not because he's had a grand emotional breakthrough. It's because he's only just beginning to feel what you've already overcome. And that's where your power lies. You no longer need his message to feel whole. You've already built your strength in his absence. After a breakup or a period of no contact, many men don't expect you to move on quickly. In fact, some assume you'll be quietly waiting, holding space for them in case they decide to return. But then something shifts. You stop looking for answers and start choosing yourself. You begin to rebuild your life, invest in your happiness, and find strength in your independence. You laugh more, take care of yourself, pursue new goals, and slowly rediscover the parts of you that may have faded during the relationship. And whether you mean to or not, that transformation becomes visible. In today's world, visibility is instant. A photo of you smiling, traveling, or simply enjoying life without him sends a powerful message. Even if you're not posting for his attention, he sees it through social media, mutual friends, or silent scrolling. And what he sees isn't bitterness or sadness. He sees growth. He sees peace. He sees a woman who looks freer, lighter, and more confident than before. And that image doesn't match the one he expected. That realization can shake something in him. The moment he realizes you're thriving without him, something changes. You become more attractive, not just physically, but emotionally. You're no longer the person who was left behind. You're the one who moved forward, the end. You've become someone he has to work to reach again. And that unfamiliar distance makes him feel uncertain and even a little threatened. It's often not just about missing you, apology has been. It's about seeing you become someone he might no longer be able to access. That shift in dynamic makes him start to question everything. So he reaches out, not always because he's ready to offer more, but because he sees your value in a way he didn't before. Your glow, your growth, your grounded energy all become magnetic to him once the apology has been. He wants to be part of that light again, hoping you'll let him back in. But what he doesn't realize is that the version of you he's now drawn to is the one who no longer needs him. You've changed, you've healed. And now the choice isn't his to make, it's yours. When a man sends that unexpected message after a long period of silence, something casual like, "Hey stranger," or "Been thinking about you," it often isn't a heartfelt attempt to rekindle something meaningful. It's more of a test. He wants to see if the door is still open. He's not necessarily diving back into the deep end of the emotional pool. Instead, he's dipping a toe in to check the temperature. These messages are usually vague and non-committal, carefully crafted to feel light and safe. The apology's been. So he doesn't risk rejection, but can still gauge your reaction. What he's really doing is checking to see if he still has influence over you. If you respond quickly, eagerly, or emotionally, he gets his answer. He learns that despite silence, the space, or even the pain he caused, he can still stir something in you. That gives him a sense of control. It reassures him that he hasn't been forgotten, that your feelings for him still linger, and that he could, if he wanted to, step right back into your life with little resistance. But if you don't respond, or you respond with calm distance, it shifts the dynamic completely. It tells him he no longer holds that emotional power. You're not hanging on to his words. You're not waiting for him to explain, apologize, or pick up where things left off. That unbothered response, or no response at all, says more than a paragraph ever could. It reflects your emotional growth and signals that he doesn't get to come and go on his terms anymore. The power he once assumed he had is now in your hands. These small, surface-level messages are rarely about true intention. They're often about curiosity, control, or comfort. He wants to feel that he's still relevant in your life without having to offer anything substantial in return. Recognizing this pattern is important because it helps protect your emotional boundaries. Not every message deserves a response. Sometimes silence is the strongest answer, and the one that shows just how much you've truly moved on. Regret doesn't always come instantly. In fact, for many men, it's a slow and quiet build. When they walk away, they might feel confident in their decision. They may convince themselves it was the right move or that something better is waiting for them. At first, life feels free, uncomplicated, and full of possibilities. But that confidence often fades with time. When the excitement wears off and reality settles in, a space opens up where your presence used to be. It might take weeks or even months, but eventually, the weight of what they lost starts to catch up with them. At first, they might not even recognize it as regret. It shows up in small moments. A memory triggered by a song once the apology has been, a place you used to visit together, or a random scroll through old photos. What once felt like a clean break slowly starts to feel incomplete. Has been. They start to remember not just the good times, but the emotional safety you gave them. They realize you weren't just a chapter in their life. You were someone who truly cared, someone who showed up, and someone they took for granted without fully understanding your value. This realization can become deeply uncomfortable. The longer they go without access to you, the more that discomfort grows. Suddenly, the things they once overlooked start to matter. They begin to understand that your patience, your kindness, your presence, those weren't things they could easily find again. And when they realize that you've moved on or started to rebuild without them, the regret intensifies. It's not just about missing you, has been. It's about recognizing that they had something rare and meaningful, and they let it go without truly appreciating it. By the time this regret fully settles in, you've often already done the hard work of healing. You've grown, changed, and come to terms with the fact that you don't need someone who didn't choose you the first time. And that's what haunts them the most. They realize they want back something they no longer have access to, and that desire, mixed with guilt, confusion, and longing, creates the exact storm of emotions that drives them to reach out, hoping it's not too late. There's something deeply unsettling for a man when he starts to feel that you no longer need him. At first, he may convince himself that your silence is temporary, that you're just giving him space, or even trying to make him chase a little. But when time passes and he sees no sign of you reaching out, showing interest, or reacting in any way, it begins to disturb the narrative he built in his head, has been. He starts to sense that your detachment isn't a strategy. It's real, has been. And that realization hits harder than anything you could have said or done. Apology has been. Detachment carries a different energy than anger or sadness. It doesn't scream, it doesn't beg, has been, and it doesn't try to prove anything. It simply exists with peace and clarity, and that peace is what rattles someone who once had control. When a man realizes that the emotional bond he thought was still intact has actually dissolved, it sends a shock through his system. He begins to panic, not always because he loves you deeply, but because he feels himself slipping from a place of importance in your life. This fear of no longer being needed is powerful. It challenges his sense of worth, his pride, and the comfort he took in knowing he was wanted. He might start overthinking, wondering if someone else has taken his place, or if you've completely rewritten the story that once included him. That uncertainty triggers a strong emotional response. And often, that's when the calls, texts, and unexpected messages begin. Not out of genuine love or clarity, but from a fear of losing control and being forgotten. When he reaches out in this state, it's usually not to offer resolution or commitment. It's to test if he still matters, if he can still influence your emotions. But what surprises him most is when he finds that he can't. Your calm response, or no response at all, confirms what he feared. You've detached. And that wake-up call is more powerful than any silence you ever gave him. It shows that you've reclaimed your power, not by punishing him, but by choosing yourself. So, why do men come back after no contact? Because your absence created presence. Because your silence became power. Because when you stopped proving your worth, he finally saw it. But here's the catch, Ig. It's not about why he came back. It's about whether he deserves a seat at the table you've already rebuilt without him. Thank you.